The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports for my consulting firm. My name was typed across the front in formal letters. Mrs. Camila Torres Whitmore. Inside was a single sheet of law firm letterhead from Bennett and Associates. I read it 3 times before the words actually registered. My mother-in-law, Vivian Whitmore, was petitioning to remove me as a beneficiary from the family trust. The trust my husband Daniel had insisted I be added to 5 years ago. The one Vivian had smiled through while signing. Her signature had been elegant and confident that day, surrounded by attorneys and family witnesses. I remembered thinking how gracious she seemed, how welcoming. I set the letter down carefully and called my own attorney, the one I'd kept on retainer since my consulting business took off 3 years ago. Something Daniel's family never knew about, never asked about, never thought to investigate. Daniel and I had been married for 7 years when he died. We met at a business conference where I was presenting on financial restructuring for mid-sized companies. He was charming, successful, and came from old money that stretched back 4 generations. The Whitmore family owned commercial properties across 3 states, with holdings that included office buildings, shopping centers, and luxury apartment complexes. His mother Vivian ruled the family empire like a queen, making every major decision with absolute authority. When Daniel proposed, she'd smiled that same pageant smile I would learn to recognize over the years. She'd welcomed me warmly, called me daughter with apparent sincerity, and insisted Daniel add me to the family trust within months of our wedding. At the time I thought it was generous and inclusive. Now I understood it was about control and obligation. She wanted me grateful and dependent, tied to the family through more than just marriage vows. My attorney, Patricia Vance, called back within an hour. She'd already pulled the trust documents from her files and reviewed the petition Vivian had filed. Camila, this is interesting. You're not just a beneficiary listed among others. According to the amended version filed 3 years ago, you're actually a co-trustee with equal authority. Any changes to beneficiaries or trust structure require your signature and approval. I sat up straighter in my office chair, processing this information carefully. What does that mean exactly in practical terms? It means Vivian can't remove you without your explicit permission. In fact, she can't make any major trust decisions without your approval and signature. There was a pause on the line. Did you know about this amendment? I hadn't. Daniel must have changed it without telling either of us, without announcing it at a family dinner or making it a discussion point. My husband, who died suddenly from a heart attack 6 months ago, had apparently left me more than just grief and memories. I pulled out the trust documents from my home safe that evening. Sure enough, buried in legal language I'd skimmed years ago when Daniel first showed them to me, was the co-trustee designation with my name clearly listed. Daniel had filed the amendment shortly after our 4th anniversary, during the summer when everything seemed perfect between us. The same year I'd saved his struggling tech investment with my consulting strategies and financial analysis. The same year Vivian had made a comment at Thanksgiving about me being surprisingly useful for someone from my background, her tone suggesting this was high praise. I came from a working-class family in a modest neighborhood. My parents owned a small grocery store where I worked every day after school. I'd put myself through business school working 3 jobs simultaneously, sleeping 4 hours a night for years. Vivian never let me forget I'd married up into her world. She called it teasing when family members looked uncomfortable. Daniel called it her way of showing affection. I called it what it was, but only in my private thoughts. 5. The next family dinner was scheduled for Friday evening at 6 o'clock. Vivian hosted these monthly gatherings at the Whitmore estate, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a formal dining room that seated 20 people comfortably. Since Daniel's death, she'd been pushing me repeatedly to sell our house and move into the guest wing of the estate. For family support, she'd said with concern in her voice. For easier grieving in a house full of people who loved Daniel. I'd politely declined every single time, making excuses about work commutes and needing my own space. Now I understood why she wanted me close and under her roof. Control is easier when your target is within reach. when you can monitor their movements and influence their decisions. I arrived exactly on time that Friday, wearing the pearl necklace Daniel had given me for our 5th anniversary. Vivian hated that necklace with barely concealed disdain. Said it was too modest for a Whitmore wife, too simple for someone in our social position. That's exactly why I wore it tonight, along with my simplest black dress. Vivian greeted me at the front door with air kisses that touched neither cheek and her practiced warmth that fooled most people. "Camila, darling. You look tired and pale. Are you managing all right in that big house all alone?" Her concern felt like a spider's web, sticky and strategic, designed to trap rather than support. "I'm managing perfectly well," I replied with a smile that matched hers. "My consulting firm just signed 2 new clients this week, both Fortune 500 companies. We're expanding into the healthcare sector." Her smile tightened slightly at the corners. "How wonderful that you're keeping busy with your little business venture. Still doing that consulting thing. Such a nice hobby." Daniel's brother, Preston, was already in the library with his wife, Simone, when I entered. Preston had always been decent to me in a distant way, but he followed his mother's lead in everything important. Simone offered me genuine sympathy with a warm hug. She'd lost her own father recently to cancer. We were allies in grief, if nothing else, understanding each other's pain. Dinner started pleasantly enough with small talk and wine. Vivian discussed the Family Foundation's upcoming charity gala in elaborate detail, listing the guest list and menu options. Preston talked about expanding the property portfolio into emerging markets in the Southeast. I listened carefully, watching Vivian's performance and timing. She was building toward something specific, I could feel it. Dessert arrived before she made her move, a chocolate torte with raspberry sauce. "Camila, dear, I wanted to discuss something important with you tonight. I've been reviewing the family trust extensively with our attorneys over the past few weeks. Some adjustments need to be made now that Daniel is gone and the family structure has changed." Her tone was casual, like discussing flower arrangements for the gala or paint colors for a room. "What kind of adjustments?" I asked, matching her lightness perfectly. "Well, the trust was originally structured around Daniel's immediate family and his direct descendants. With him gone, it makes sense to simplify things considerably. Return to the original beneficiary structure from when his father was alive." She meant to remove me entirely from any connection to Whitmore money. I set down my fork carefully on the edge of my dessert plate. "What does the trust attorney say about these adjustments?" I kept my voice curious rather than challenging. Vivian waved her hand dismissively, her diamond rings catching the chandelier light. "Oh, it's all very straightforward and simple. Just some paperwork to sign, really just a formality. I've already had the documents prepared by Howard Bennett." She produced a thick folder from beside her chair where it had been waiting. Always prepared, always 3 steps ahead, always assuming compliance from those around her. I opened the folder and pretended to read carefully, though Patricia had already reviewed identical documents that afternoon. "These remove me as both beneficiary and co-trustee," I observed quietly, looking up at her. Vivian's smile never wavered or cracked. "Oh yes. It's really just a formality, dear. You'll be well provided for through Daniel's personal estate and life insurance. There's no need for you to be burdened with trust management decisions." No. Daniel's personal estate was substantial by most standards, but it was nothing compared to the family trust's holdings. The trust held the commercial properties worth tens of millions, the investment portfolios that generated passive income, the real power of the Whitmore wealth accumulated over generations. Vivian was trying to cut me out of the family's financial future while making it sound like a kindness and simplification. I closed the folder slowly and smiled back at her with the same pleasant expression. "I'll need to have my attorney review these carefully before signing anything. It's what Daniel would have wanted me to do. Be careful and thorough." The temperature in the dining room dropped 10 degrees instantly. Vivian's smile became sharper, more predatory. "Camila, there's really no need to involve attorneys in family business. This is just paperwork between us." "Exactly," I agreed smoothly. "Which is why I need to be careful and protect Daniel's wishes." I'm sure you understand. The dinner ended awkwardly with forced conversation about nothing important. Preston tried to smooth things over with small talk about sports and weather, but Vivian had gone cold and withdrawn. As I was leaving, gathering my coat and purse, she caught my arm in the marble foyer. Her grip was surprisingly strong for a woman in her 60s. You know, dear, fighting this will only make things difficult and uncomfortable. For everyone involved, including you. I looked at her hand on my arm, then met her eyes directly. I'm not fighting anything, Vivian. I'm just being responsible and careful, like you taught me to be. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel, my mind already planning next steps. She'd shown her cards too early, and revealed her intentions before securing my agreement. Assumed I was too grief-stricken or too intimidated to push back effectively. She'd made the same mistake everyone made about me throughout my life. She'd underestimated the girl from the grocery store who'd fought for everything she had. 11. Patricia called me Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. I've done some digging into the trust structure and its history. Camila, this is bigger than I initially thought when you first called. The trust doesn't just hold property and investments. It controls voting shares in Whitmore Holdings, the parent company for all their businesses and subsidiaries. As co-trustee, you effectively have veto power over any major business decisions they want to make. My coffee went cold as I processed this information and its implications. Does Vivian know this? She must, Patricia replied. That's probably why she's so desperate to remove you now. There's something else important. The trust has a clause that if all co-trustees can't agree on management decisions, the trust goes into mandatory mediation with an independent reviewer. You could force a complete review of how it's being managed, every transaction, every decision. I smiled slowly. Tell me more about this mediation process and how it works. 12. I spent the entire weekend reviewing every trust document, every business filing, every property deed connected to Whitmore Holdings. Daniel had been meticulous about keeping records in organized files, and I'd helped him digitize and organize everything 2 years ago when he was worried about his mother's increasingly risky investments and decisions. That's when I saw the patterns clearly. Properties purchased at inflated prices from companies Vivian's brother owned. Consulting fees paid to firms run by her college friends with no clear deliverables. Monthly retainers for services never actually provided. Nothing technically illegal, but everything carefully designed to funnel family money to her personal network. Daniel had noticed too. His handwriting in the margins asking questions he'd never gotten answers to, concerns he'd never gotten to pursue. Now I would pursue them for him, finish what he'd started. 15. Monday morning, Vivian's attorney called my office directly. Mr. Howard Bennett had a voice like expensive scotch, smooth and practiced from decades of high-stakes negotiations. Mrs. Torres Whitmore, I'm calling on behalf of Mrs. Vivian Whitmore regarding the trust restructuring proposal. I understand you have some concerns about the documents. I have questions, so I corrected them firmly. About the necessity and timing of these changes. About why this is suddenly urgent. There was a pause on the line, a slight crack in his smoothness. Mrs. Whitmore feels it's in everyone's best interest to simplify the trust structure given the family circumstances. I'm sure we can address any concerns you might have in a meeting. I'm sure we can, I agreed pleasantly. Let's schedule a meeting soon. My attorney will attend with me. And I want to review the complete trust financial history for the past 7 years. Every transaction, every contract, every decision. His smooth tone faltered slightly. That's quite extensive and will take time to compile. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at Bennett & Associates' downtown office in their largest conference room. I arrived with Patricia and 3 bankers' boxes full of documents Daniel had saved over the years. Vivian was already there with her attorney and Preston, looking surprised to see the boxes. What's all this? She asked, her casual tone obviously forced. Research, I replied simply, setting the boxes on the polished conference table. I've been reviewing the trust's financial management over the years. Just being thorough like you always taught me. We sat around a conference table that probably cost more than my first car had. Howard Bennett began with prepared remarks about the trust's history and structure, speaking in rehearsed paragraphs. I let him talk without interruption. Patricia took careful notes. When he finished his presentation, I opened the first box methodically. I have some questions about specific transactions over the past several years. 15. For the next 2 hours, I walked through property purchases that made no economic sense whatsoever. Consulting contracts with no deliverables or measurable results. Loans to family members that were never repaid or even acknowledged. Each time I asked simple, direct questions that demanded answers. What was the business justification for this purchase? Where's the documentation supporting this decision? How did this transaction benefit the trust beneficiaries? Vivian's face grew tighter with each question I raised. Preston looked increasingly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. These are all legitimate business expenses, Vivian finally snapped, her composure cracking. Approved by the trust management following proper procedures. You were a co-trustee for 3 years, I reminded her gently but firmly. You approved these transactions personally. But Daniel was the primary trustee for most of these years. Did he approve of them? Howard Bennett cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mrs. Whitmore had authorization to handle day-to-day management decisions independently. 16. I pulled out Daniel's notebook, the one with his margin questions written in his distinctive handwriting. My husband had concerns about some of these transactions before he died suddenly. He never got the chance to investigate them fully or get answers. I'd like to complete his work and honor his wishes. As co-trustee, I'm formally requesting a complete independent audit of the trust's finances for the past 7 years. Every account, every transaction, every contract. Vivian stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. This is ridiculous and insulting. You're trying to cause trouble over nothing, making accusations. I remained seated calmly. I'm protecting the trust beneficiaries and their interests. That includes your grandchildren through Preston. Don't you want to ensure their inheritance is being managed properly and ethically? Preston shifted in his seat uncomfortably. Actually, Mom, an audit might not be a bad idea at all. Just to have everything clear and documented. Vivian's look could have frozen fire instantly. 17. The meeting ended with no resolution or agreement. Vivian refused to agree to an independent audit. I refused to sign the restructuring documents. We were at a stalemate, which meant the trust's mediation clause would automatically activate within 30 days. Patricia was delighted with this outcome. This is perfect for us. In mediation, everything gets reviewed by a neutral party. Every transaction, every decision, every questionable contract. If there's mismanagement or self-dealing, it'll come out in the open. That night, I received a text from Simone, Preston's wife. Preston wants to talk to you privately. Away from his mother and the attorneys. Can you meet him for coffee tomorrow morning? I agreed immediately. Preston had always been the reasonable one in the family. Maybe he was finally ready to see what I was seeing clearly. Or maybe this was another strategy from Vivian. Either way, I'd be prepared for anything. Preston looked exhausted when we met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from anywhere family might see us. He ordered black coffee and sat across from me with the weight of the world on his shoulders. My mother is furious with you. She's talking about fighting this in court, hiring more attorneys. I sipped my latte slowly. I'm not trying to hurt your family, Preston. I'm trying to protect what Daniel built and believed in. He rubbed his face tiredly. No. And honestly, I've had my own questions about some of Mom's business decisions over the years. But she's my mother and I owe her loyalty. This puts me in an impossible position between you and her. I understand loyalty completely, I said gently. But what happens when loyalty requires you to ignore serious problems? When does silence become complicated? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his coffee. Show me what you found. Show me everything. 19. We spent 3 hours going through the documents methodically. Preston was a trained accountant before joining the family business full-time. He saw what I saw immediately. couldn't deny the patterns. "This property purchase," he said, pointing to a transaction from 3 years ago. "This was bought from Uncle Richard's company at twice market value. No competitive bidding." He nodded. "And this consulting contract paid to your mother's friend's firm. $300,000 annually for services that were never clearly defined or measured." Preston's face grew grim as we continued through the boxes. By the end, he looked physically sick. "She's been siphoning money from the family trust for years. Not stealing exactly in a legal sense, but definitely prioritizing her interests and her friends over everyone else's financial well-being." I waited silently. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked finally, leaving the decision to him. 20. Preston took a full week to think about his decision and its consequences. During that time, Vivian escalated her campaign against me dramatically. She called extended family members, painting me as a gold digger trying to steal what wasn't mine by right. She suggested to mutual friends that grief had made me paranoid and grasping. She even had her attorney send threatening letters about my consulting firm's business practices and client relationships. Nothing legally actionable, just harassment designed to pressure me. I documented everything meticulously. Every call, every letter, every rumor I heard repeated. Patricia advised patience and restraint. "She's panicking, which means we're winning. That means our position is strong. Let her dig her own hole deeper." On Friday afternoon, Preston called my cell phone. "I'm with you on this. I want the independent audit. But I need you to understand, this is going to destroy my relationship with my mother permanently." 21. The mediation began 2 weeks later with a neutral trustee appointed by the court. A neutral trustee was appointed to review all trust documents and transactions objectively. Vivian fought every step of the process, but the trust's own bylaws required full cooperation with mediation. Preston sided with me publicly, which meant we had majority support among beneficiaries. The investigation took 3 full months of detailed analysis. During that time, Vivian barely spoke to me at all. At required family gatherings, she was icily polite and nothing more. The rest of the family split into camps predictably. Some supported her, believing I was an outsider causing trouble for selfish reasons. Others quietly thanked me for finally asking questions they'd been afraid to raise themselves. The final mediation report was damning in its findings. Not illegal exactly, but clearly showing mismanagement and self-dealing over many years. Vivian had treated the family trust like her personal bank account for pet projects. 22. The mediator's recommendations were clear and specific. Vivian should be removed as trustee immediately. A professional management company should oversee the trust going forward. All questionable transactions from the past 7 years should be reviewed for possible recovery of funds. And the trust structure should be maintained exactly as Daniel had established it, with me as co-trustee alongside Preston. Vivian sat in stony silence as the mediator presented his findings in detail. Her attorney tried to argue and find loopholes, but the evidence was overwhelming and documented. When it came time to vote on accepting the recommendations, Preston voted yes without hesitation. I voted yes firmly. Vivian was outvoted in her own family trust by the people she'd tried to control. The empire she'd controlled for decades was slipping from her fingers permanently. 23. 2 weeks after the mediation concluded officially, Vivian requested a private meeting with me. We met at a neutral restaurant downtown, no family members, no attorneys present. She looked older than I'd ever seen her before, worn down by the fight and the loss of control she'd wielded. "You've destroyed everything I built," she said quietly, without her usual commanding tone. "I destroyed corruption and mismanagement," I corrected gently but firmly. "There's a significant difference." She laughed bitterly. "You think you're protecting Daniel's legacy. He never cared about these details or financial matters. He trusted me completely to handle things. Maybe at first I agreed honestly, but he stopped trusting blindly toward the end. That's why he made me co-trustee without telling you. He saw what I saw eventually. He just didn't live long enough to fix it himself." Vivian's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall in front of me. 24. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Finally, Vivian spoke again in a different tone. What happens now to everything? Now, I said carefully, the trust is managed properly by professionals. Your grandchildren's inheritance is protected for their future. The family businesses are run with proper oversight and accountability. And you get to be a grandmother instead of a CEO. You can actually enjoy your family. She flinched visibly. You're punishing me for my mistakes. I'm setting boundaries, I corrected again. There's a crucial difference between the two. You can still be part of this family, Vivian. You just can't control everything and everyone anymore. She stood to leave, gathering her coat and purse. Then she paused at the table. Daniel chose well when he married you. I just wish I'd seen it sooner and respected you properly. It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever receive from her. 25. 6 months later, the trust was running smoothly under professional management with transparent reporting. Property values had actually increased with better oversight and strategic decisions. Questionable contracts were cancelled and replaced with legitimate business relationships that made economic sense. Preston had taken on more leadership in the family businesses, finally stepping out of his mother's shadow and making his own decisions. Vivian had reluctantly accepted her diminished role, though she still tried to offer unsolicited advice at family dinners. I continued running my consulting firm successfully, now with the financial security the trust provided. The girl from the grocery store had become the signature that decided the fate of an empire. Not because I wanted power or revenge, but because someone needed to ask the hard questions nobody else would. Daniel had known that. That's why he'd made sure I had the authority to protect what mattered most. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or public. It's simply refusing to sign away your power when someone assumes you will comply without question.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy watching Karma, Payback, come full circle every week, we dive into tales of betrayal and poetic justice. Don't miss the next one. Tap the subscribe button and join the Revenge Squad.